Hello, Ed.
Hello, Jeff.
Ed Lyons. There's an election next year, like there is every 2 years. Senator Elizabeth Warren is going to be on the ballot for United States Senate. She's running for re-election. We've got a crowded field? No.
Several people
running.
Most
Several
unknown.
legitimate people. Some not so legitimate. I don't know if we'll mention the not so legitimates on this episode.
They're people that I have never heard of.
Well, this is a Republican podcast, which I don't even know if you could say that about the rest of the podcasts out here that they claim to be in the universe. There's, they claim to be independents, but they're conservative and they lean a certain way politically, but not flat-out party affiliation. I don't even know how to start. All right, where do we begin? Okay.
So the 2018 proposes 2 federal races for us. One
Yes.
for the 3rd congressional district where Nikki Tsongas is not running again.
And there's a crowded field of Democrats.
A crowded field on
very
their
crowded.
side and not crowded on our side.
And what I'd like to say for all those folks out there in podcast land, I hope to talk to each of the Democratic field. I'd like to get their ideas on why they're running and what that would be. So we're working behind the scenes to line up those folks. I hope to have all of them and publicly, put pressure on them to come on this podcast and talk to us. I think it's a good thing, especially if they're running for a race. And basically, they'll be going up against Rick Green.
Yeah, it's amazing that there's such competition amongst people with great seasoning and money and networks behind them, and that on our side we only have Rick Green. I think that's unfortunate, but Rick is a good guy.
No, that's awesome. In this case, that's awesome.
No, it is. I mean, Rick is
because let me tell you something. In Massachusetts, we don't want primaries. Primaries aren't a good thing. They're bad. They spend money because here's the thing. Dan Coe raised $800K.
Yeah,
he's got to spend a lot of that before the primary.
No,
That's a good thing.
I have been on record for years saying that the party is too weak for primaries at the top races.
Right.
But I think in a few minutes we're going to say I think that maybe in the Senate race, the first time I think there's a point to a primary. We'll get to that in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But I've never. In the past 7 years, I have never said I saw a point to a primary in a big race. Now there might be. But you're right. On the CD3 side, I don't see a point in running against Rick Green. I don't see that at all.
No. Rick will be fine. I'm going to help Rick out. I like Rick. First of all, Rick's actually a bit of a unicorn. He's a good candidate. He's a good speaker. He's
a good guy.
He's a good guy.
And that matters.
It absolutely does. He's a good guy. He's a good candidate. He's a smart guy. He's also capable of raising a large amount of money, which is critical. He's been in this universe before. He's built up a lot of goodwill. Look, he's got a good team behind him, so I'm not going to give him any advice that he wouldn't. I've even just tweeted. I'm just like, just campaign in the cities, campaign in Lowell, and whatever you can do in Lawrence. Just show up. Like before, we've never showed up. Just show up and do your best, but really campaign in Lowell. Diminish the, if we always lose Lowell and Lawrence by 30, try to lose it by 20. If we do that, he'll win. So that's what I hope he does.
The history is that he'll get creamed. Nothing about the history of Republicans running for either 3rd or the 5th is good. The history is all bad.
Okay. Let's set this. Let's talk about this first, right out of the gate. The history is not good. Okay, this is all the theoreticals rolled up into one race. You gotta move to the side for the camera. I don't know if you're blocking it or not. Just kidding. I mean, sort of.
Why is history bad?
Okay, now let's. These are the unicorns we keep chasing. Unicorn number one. How does the myth of the unicorn get started? The myth of the unicorn gets started by how somebody does how a higher level candidate, a statewide candidate, does in a certain district, whether that district is a state senate district, a congressional district, a House rep district. Right. So how did Scott Brown do? How did Charlie Baker do? In those specific districts. What you measure it, and that creates the mythical unicorn. And for instance, Gabriel Gomez. Gabriel Gomez, from what I understand, won CD3. Scott Brown win CD3? It was 2012. So I know Baker won CD3.
He
right?
did. He did.
Right. So okay. So thus the myth of the unicorn is born. Now, as the thinking goes, well, if Charlie Baker could win CD3, why couldn't some other Republican? It's perfectly logical, makes perfectly sense, makes perfectly good sense.
But they don't translate.
They don't.
This
is true. But this is where we get a
Jacob Ventura lost at a district. Charlie Baker won.
That's not a fair comparison because you had short sleeve in there as a third party. I'm sorry, third parties always throw it off. I want the what will happen. Look, if a third party gets into CD3, it could throw everything off. It's probably what the Democrats do to win everything anyway. And I'm not saying I would murder a third-party congressional candidate in condition, but they might want to sleep with one eye open. Regardless, Ventura's race, I'm sorry, but when third-party candidates are in the race, it dramatically affects it. Look, I don't care what anybody says.
It seems to be a factor.
Look, if you look at Governor Baker's 2010 race, gone over these numbers quite a few times. If Tim Cahill's not in that race, it's probably going to go Baker, or it's going to be minutely closer. Probably. Okay, so the third party factor has a huge effect. Whether they're straw candidates or not, I don't know. Now,
I just meant that the unicorn. So when Scott Brown won in 2010, January 2010, against Martha Coakley, I volunteered.
You think we could get her to run for congressional district? You think we could get her to run for the third?
Well, Scott Brown won in this freakish, unrepeatable special election. 3.5 months later, I worked for a special election campaign for Jim Dixon in Waltham on a state rep campaign.
All right, yeah.
And that basically I was doing a little bit of the voter data for them and some other things in Waltham. We used to work out of a dress shop in Waltham. There was like a back room of a kid's dress shop where the campaign was located because Jim didn't have any money. Jim was an airline pilot, good man. He's still a good man.
No, I know Jim. He's a good guy.
He's a great guy. And we're looking at the data. We said Scott Brown won this district, right?
It's the theoretical, yeah.
He won it literally 9 weeks ago. It wasn't like he won it in some distant past. He just won the district, right?
Right.
And Jim Dixon's politics were similar enough to Scott Brown's, and his demographic correlation was similar. It was like it sort of like buoyed the campaign. And
it's even more so because it's a state race. It's not a federal race, so you'd think there's even more of a factor. But
Jim Dixon was a good man who lost by a lot, right?
Yeah.
And he'd run against him once before. I'm not saying that the campaign did anything wrong. I meant the fact that nobody was able to reproduce Scott Brown won my district to pick up new seats. Nobody did.
This is true. Okay, but these are how these myths born.
The comparisons aren't always accurate.
So in GOP circles in Massachusetts, the Cape Cod district is the mythical district. It's the district that every goddamn Republican seems to win, except for the congressional candidate running in it.
I saw John Chapman at Beth's thing the other day. John was there.
Yeah, look, John Chapman was a good guy, smart candidate, actually raised a decent amount of money, not as even close to as much as Kingston not Kingston, excuse me. We'll get into that Keating.
Yeah.
But he raised a few $100,000, smart guy, ran a decent campaign, but he lost by 9 or 10. There are enormous factors. You have to run a campaign that gets you noticed and gets people willing to vote R when they'd otherwise vote D. Now,
and you can't use so-and-so won my district as your reason for winning. That's not enough.
No, not for winning. No, you have to run an independently good campaign. Now, this is the thing. Rick is savvy enough. He's going to run a good campaign. It's going to be a well-funded campaign. He's going to actually get. It's going to. I wouldn't even. The NRCC may even take a peek at it because he's run it that well. By the way, Richard Tassay, he's a congressman if Fishman is never in that race.
So what?
If Fishman, Dan Fishman, the Libertarian candidate, Richard to say is a congressman.
Yeah.
It's congressman to say. So this is the thing. I'm not giving away any strategy here. If the Democrats want to win the CD third, they put up a straw person as an independent thing, which they're probably working on anyway because they're like that.
I don't think they'll listen to you.
Well, they have a really yeah. Well, this is the thing. If you're an independent candidate, you better you better wear a bullet. Wear some Kevlar because I look. Here's the point.
I think Fishman just heard us. By the way, I think you're right about that.
What's that?
I think Dan Fishman just heard us.
Well, he was a libertarian. He helped us lose an election. Period.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Every time he runs.
Every time. Look, the stars have aligned for the 3rd congressional district for a GOP opponent. You have a good candidate who's a good guy, smart guy, going to be well-funded, articulate on the stump, who's going to campaign in the cities. All of that stuff. It's the stars have aligned. Charlie Baker will be at the top of the ticket, okay? It's a midterm year. So like all of these checks that we say, okay, if we could just get midterm, if we just get good guy at the top of the ticket, well-funded candidate, check. We're going to have that. This is the test case, in my opinion.
For what?
For whether or not we can win federally or not.
Oh, okay.
For the next few years till the next census and they redraw the lines. And I mean that because Gabe Gomez won the district, Baker won the district, Brown won the district, I think. Well, I know Gomez and Baker won it, but regardless, this is the shot. Now, there are 50 reasons I'm sure you're dying to rattle off why Rick probably
I think
won't
he's toast.
Yeah, I know. Okay, look.
He'll lose by 12 points. Ed Lyons
12
saying officially
points?
On November 4th, Rick Green will lose by at least 12 points.
No.
Write that down.
I'll put large sums of money. It won't be 12. But here's the thing about it.
I like Rick, by the way.
Rick is a terrific
He's a
guy,
good man.
and he knows what he's getting into. In spite of all this is why I'm saying the stars have aligned for this as being a good test case, because this is all the stuff we talk about in our political circles as being, well, if this could only happen, we'd have a good shot. Well, it's here. It's here, folks. And Rick will run a good campaign. He'll run a solid campaign.
I like what he's done so far.
Yeah, no, he's going to run a good campaign. He knows about it. But in spite of all of that, he's still a tremendous underdog. And open seat too. By the way, that's the other.
It's nice that it's an open seat.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's one of those
nice.
One of those check boxes that's a big part of it.
It is a check box for us.
Plus, they're all going to fight it out and spend a ton of money beforehand, and Rick's already just going to build his war chest. But so all the stars have aligned. Can it be put together? Theoretically, yes. But in spite of that, it's still going to be. It's still the odds are not in his favor, and that goes to show you how tough it is to get elected to federal office in this state. But
as a Republican,
as a Republican, it's that tough. I don't even know why I said all of that, but I'm just saying this is the test case. Open seat. Rick's a good candidate. Tons of money. Or well-funded. Dems are going to spend all their money. Favorable numbers from Gomez, from Baker, maybe Brown. This is it. If we can't pull this off, people thinking about running for Congress really have to rethink it, maybe till Bill Keating gives up his seat in the 9th. And
it is my view right now, my personal view, that the federal offices are out of reach for the Mass GOP right now.
Yeah, but so all right, you think he's going to lose by 12? I think that's a silly number, but I'll entertain it for a second. Why? Give me a concrete reason why it'll be that much of a loss. Look, I think it's going to be tighter than people think. Maybe if Rick loses, it'll be more along the lines of 53-47, which is still, in any other universe, it's probably a beating by 6 points.
He'll be outraised enormously, money-wise.
Why? How?
Because
Why?
the Democrats have more donors, more big donors, more small. Rick will lose all the media endorsements.
Well, yeah, but media endorsements don't matter, but money,
do.
money does. Money does.
Media endorsements matter a little bit.
You think that primary? You think they have 2 months? 2 months after that. So September primary, Democrats set this thing. They have a competitive side on this.
Their primaries generally produce stronger nominees. So I don't know whether Daniel Coe is going to win with all of his money and all of his vast political experience, which Rick Green does not have. We don't know
what kind of candidate he's going to be.
What?
We don't know what kind of candidate he's going to be.
Look, the man ran the city of Boston for years, okay? I think he knows the political landscape very, very well.
We don't know what kind of candidate he's going to be.
But honestly, the guy knows politics, right? So therefore that he knows who he has to be. I don't know. There's a Latino woman who's announced who may win, and I can't think of her name right now. It's escaping me. And
she's state rep
Lawrence.
out of Lawrence, yeah.
I can't think of her name right now. I had it before. And, Lawrence is enormously important. So I don't know what will happen. Lawrence is the reason why our friend Jameson is not in the state senate right now. Lawrence is a bottomless pit of Democratic votes if they run their campaign properly. I mean, of course, they may not show up, but I mean, there's so many votes there that are not voting Republican no matter what Rick Green says.
Yeah.
Right? So I think, let's pull back a little bit. I think there are federal issues that Rick Green faces just like Jeff Deal, John Kingston, and Beth Lindstrom face. I think there's a common federal case the Republicans have to deal with that has nothing to do with the individual campaigns who are all experimenting with what's going to work at the federal level. I do think that Massachusetts wants different things out of federal candidates than state legislative candidates, and the Republicans have to figure out, well, what are those differences and how can I appeal to them? So I don't know the answer to that, but I do think that campaigns have to figure out what does a state want out of a federal campaign that they don't want out of a state campaign. They're different.
No, I don't think that matters. I mean, I think that should matter. In the way you framed it,
So Baker is held accountable to state standards, not federal standards, as an example.
I think the percentage of voters that think in that manner are so vastly insignificant in the terms of their impact on the electorate.
But the policies are all different.
That doesn't matter.
What?
I don't think that matters. I mean, this is the type of thing that
okay. So you don't think people are thinking of that. You don't think that?
I don't. No. I think it's going to be.
They can't separate Washington and Boston.
I think they can, but I don't think I just don't think most do. Do you know what I mean? I don't think most do. I'm not saying people can't. That's not what I'm saying. I'll say what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that most people aren't concerned with those aspects of it. I think it will come down to a traditional message campaign on both sides, and whatever that message is. Meaning, and whoever the nominee is for the district, what they run on, what they decide to run on, and how they reach the voters who are going to show up on election day.
But the issues aren't the same.
Of course, they're not the
same. Are they just voting partisanship? Why would they vote the same way at the federal level?
The issues aren't the same as state issues, but that doesn't mean that they're going to necessarily completely invert their state elected leanings, meaning vote for Baker.
It's complementary.
Yeah. But my point being, it's going to the way each campaign and each nominee runs their campaign and what they communicate to the voters has a much bigger impact than the generic state versus federal thought process that certain individual who blogs across the street went on and on and on about how how America would never give control of the federal government, the executive and two chambers of the legislative branch to the Republicans. I mean, it's sort of how the thinking behind it is a little bit how it should be and how it was, but I don't believe how it is now. Do you know what I mean?
So basically, my opinion is that I think all the candidates, based on what I know today, are doomed. Now, that could change. So I think we're headed for a wave election. I'm old enough to remember more than one wave election. So in 1993 and 94, I remember when the country was just mad at the Democrats in Washington. It was a question of years of corruption in House of Representatives. They didn't like the direction of the country. Washington seemed to produce nothing but things from the Democrats they did not like. And in the 1994 election, the Republicans just took over. Not a single Republican lost his seat nationwide in the federal races, and many Democrats lost their seats. It was a wave election for Newt Gingrich in 94. There are other wave elections. I get the feeling that the National Republican, the Congress has like an 8% approval rating nationwide. They're very mad at the Republican Congress. Every piece of national news coming from Washington has Donald Trump attached to it. And I think that in this state, they're ready to come to the polls and repudiate Donald Trump in 2018. That's a while from now. That could change. I can't see any Republican making a non-Donald Trump-related case for office. Even though I wish everything wasn't about Trump, every piece of news from Washington comes with Trump or their House Republicans. And I don't understand how the state decides to replace Elizabeth Warren with the Republican. I don't see how that happens right now. I just think Washington is all negative for this state. I don't understand who says we should get rid of Warren and replace her with a Republican. I don't see it. That could change. I don't get it.
Well, we'll get into Warren in a second because that's a different aspect. I think it'll probably depend on what kind of. Right now, if the election were held today, I think Republicans would be just fine.
What?
Right now, if the election were held today, a year out, Republicans would be A-OK. Because
I disagree, but that's fine.
No, that's fine. But and here's why. Because I've seen nothing that in the Democratic playbook that has shown me they're willing to adapt their tactics, strategy, or message to appeal to even a slightly broader audience. It is more tacking to the left, more divisiveness, more social justice, more of what I believe lost them all of the gains that they had of the past 10 years. Now,
they're not losing here. This is the bluest state in America. We're in Massachusetts.
Right.
The fact that they can't win Colorado is stupid for them. But here, they are in control. And here is the bluest state in America. They cannot adapt and still win here. Jamie Eldridge is still in the Senate for whatever goddamn reason. They don't have to adapt here to win.
Well, maybe. Every area of the state is different.
Now, I'd be worried about them in Ohio, but here, they don't have to do anything to win.
No.
Elizabeth Warren,
they have to turn out
all Elizabeth Warren's problems, she has a 56% approval rating in Massachusetts despite all of her problems. That's above 50%. That means that a Republican who runs against her has to break new ground. Not only that, in order to beat Elizabeth Warren, you have to convince a ton of people who voted for Clinton instead of Trump to vote for you. How do you convince people, after Trump's disastrous first year, how do you convince all these Clinton voters to vote for Republican against Warren, despite Warren's problems? At the moment, I don't see it. Who are the Clinton voters, and why are they going to flip and vote for Republican?
Well, first of all, not all the Clinton voters will show up.
What?
Not all the Clinton voters will show up.
Clinton won Massachusetts by more. Just to center this podcast in the state that we're sitting in.
Did you not just hear what I said?
What?
Not all the Clinton voters will show up.
It doesn't matter. She won by a landslide here.
Oh, Lord.
The biggest in the whole country. We are the number one Clinton state.
You've said that several times. It's a midterm election. Not all the Clinton voters will show up.
I agree. They don't have to.
Okay, so they may not have to, but a significant amount. Now.
She won by, 25 points, Jeff? Come on.
Oh, yeah, it was bad.
So you think a quarter of the electorate is not going to show up?
No. Here's the problem you have. This is the bigger problem. Is that Elizabeth Warren is more well-liked than Hillary Clinton was. That is, she has higher favorables than that with her core constituency, which is the hardcore liberal base and even the moderate, if that's even a term, the moderate liberal base here in Massachusetts. She is beloved by them. That's a solid. What would you give that number of just percentage of raw voters in Massachusetts that lover?
Who?
Warren.
I don't know. I would love her.
I'd say 35.
Sure.
You don't think it's? I mean,
I don't have a. That sounds fine. I don't have a better answer.
Okay. All right. So, but I'm saying like 35 is 35% is the people that will vote for her no matter what. Right? Okay. What do you think the percentage of people, of voters who will show up in a midterm election, that the same people that are going to elect Charlie Baker, to re-elect Charlie Baker, what percentage of the overall population of voters can't stand Elizabeth Warren or really just don't like her? If the ones that love her are 35, I think, and the polling backs me up in my estimate here.
I'm trying to remember, what is the disfavorable number for her? I want to say it's...
It was kind of high. It was in the 40s, I want to say. Low 40s? I mean, we'll call Steve. We'll tweet at Steve Cozella
to
get her on. Am I pausing? All right. So, if 35% love her,
my guess is that 25% hate her.
25?
I think it could be more, but it's at least 25.
Okay. So 25 plus 35 carry the one. I mean, you're looking at, that's it, 40% open.
Sure. Well,
Okay.
I don't know.
Maybe. It's probably a significant amount less than 40% of the voters are open to it. Probably a significant amount less than that. But there's your rationale. You've got to make the case. I think there are ways to make the case. I will hopefully. I think there are solid ways to make the case that I would make the case to people running, for the people running. They can hire me if they want. We're talking, but it's not impossible. And I use that in the broadest of terms. Look, no, but this is the thing when we get into it, you and I get into it, or we get into it on Facebook. I don't think any Republican, whether it's Rick in CD3 or if it's any of the Senate candidates, are being Pollyanna about this. I think they know how difficult it's going to be. They know how hard it's going to be, and they know what the odds are. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they should just give up, throw their hands in the air, and say, oh, well, we'll just cede the ground and we won't run against them. And you still got to fight the fight, even if it's a chance.
But it does matter that things have to happen that haven't happened yet. So when Sean Bielak ran against Barney Frank in 2010, we were both friends with him. Barney Frank was vulnerable. He had high disfavorables. He was an arrogant pain in the ass. He seemed to have a hand in the housing crisis. He was vulnerable. It was not impossible for Sean Bielak to beat him. Sean raised money. He was charismatic. He had a nice resume. It wasn't impossible. But the things that needed to happen didn't happen. And I want to say, like, it's not impossible for Rick Green to win CD3. It's certainly not impossible for Elizabeth Warren to lose. But it's important to say that certain things would have to happen that have not happened yet for Rick to win and for Warren to lose, right? And I'm okay with...
Maybe. I mean, look, but...
Warren has zillions of dollars, tens of thousands of volunteers. The media loves her. Yeah, I know plenty of people who voted for Baker who will never vote against Warren. There are a lot of Baker voters in that building next door to WGBH who will never vote against Elizabeth Warren. There really is a split.
Yeah.
And they won't decide the election.
But
they won't decide the election.
Yeah,
Those people are a subset. But
right.
I meant that there are people who love Charlie Baker who would never vote for more Republican power in this Congress, ever. It's not zero, it's not decisive, but there's a lot of them. For instance, in 2014, there are 200,000 people who voted for Maura Healey, who voted for Baker, who didn't vote for Coakley. I guarantee you, those 200,000 people who voted for Maura Healey are not voting for Rick Green or Beth Lindstrom or John Kingstrom. They're not voting for them.
Well,
Baker has cost of repeal that they will not.
Well, because, I mean, yes.
It's federal versus state. That part matters.
It matters to a point.
I don't know how much.
It also matters who the candidate is.
Sure.
Look, you wouldn't have people like John Kingston like Beth, like Jeff. Not going to mention the other guy because he's a dirtbag.
The also rans.
Yeah.
They're not serious.
Yeah, no, they've done some.
They're not getting 15%. I'll tell you that.
No,
much.
they're not getting 15%. Just drop out now.
By the way, that was only announced for our podcast listeners. It was only announced about 3 weeks ago that.
You want more? Go for a light beer, like a Coors Light. Coors Light.
By the way, that was only announced 3 weeks ago. The fact that federal candidates, this wasn't the case before, do have to get 15% at the convention.
And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Let me
tell
tell
our
you
listeners that.
A little bit of a tangent here. I'm glad as a Republican, what the National Party should have done is should have registration requirements. Like you have to be a Republican for at least 6 years or something before you run for office as a Republican. You can't just be a usurper and come in at the last minute.
I haven't heard that. I like that. I haven't heard that, but I like that.
It was something like that. I'm just floating out there.
The details aren't important, but the idea is good.
But the idea that you can't hijack my party, yeah. Even folks at the top, you got to be a Republican in the fight, doing,
whatever your role
contributing to the struggle. But look, the way you win in CD3 is you run a good, solid, better campaign, one-on-one, no third party, and you got a real shot. All the stars have aligned. If Rick can't get it done, we'll see in a year from now. I can guarantee you it won't be close to 12 points. It'll probably be, if he loses, it'll be half that. Holy shit.
By the way, Donald Trump
That's a large beer. Which one's mine?
Lost CD3.
Which one's mine? Okay, thank you. Well, Rick's not
I think
Donald.
it's way more complicated than that, but I accept that you believe that.
No,
I think Donald Trump lost CD3 by huge margins, and Rick Green outed himself as a Trump voter, and he'll be slaughtered for this.
It's not a presidential year. It's not a presidential year. It's a midterm year. Baker's at the top of the
It will be a referendum on Trump, I guarantee you.
You might be right. I won't say there won't be. You might be
Mueller
right.
may force the issue in a way that we don't expect.
No, that's another episode, and that's probably not going to happen. But I don't want to cover news, and that's, anyway. Point being,
Rick Green could not beat Kirsten Hughes for Mass GOP chairman, and he's going to win in Congress.
That's a horrible comparison. That's a horrible
comparison. It was fun
comparison.
anyway.
That's a horrible comparison. It doesn't even make sense. It's ridiculous.
Rick Green has run for office once, and he lost.
When did, what? He ran for, what, office of chair?
Yeah.
Where there's 80 total votes. He lost by 1 vote.
I was there.
And that's because, and the next day, after Scott Brown called about half the people that voted, or all the people that voted
for Kirsten Hughes.
I'm talking. After Scott Brown called the folks that asked him to vote for Kirsten, he moved to New Hampshire. So.
Oh, he screwed everybody.
Yeah, Scott did that. Anyway, the point being, Rick's got as good a shot as he's ever going to get. And it's going to come down to old school, basic campaigning, and not necessarily some referendum on Trump. Point of fact...
Does ideology matter at all to you, Jeff?
Yes, because point of fact, Rick was the head of Kasich's arm in New Hampshire and Massachusetts.
That's right. But he fell in line and got behind Trump.
I don't necessarily think that. He was Kasich's guy.
He voted for Trump. He did not apologize for it to the Boston Herald.
This is a good point. See, Ed's virulently anti-Trump. So the projection of that towards, and everybody else needs to meet that standard for you to be happy with their performance of campaigning. And it's vastly more complicated than that, because you have a significant portion of the electorate that does like him. And a significant...
Is there a significant portion of Massachusetts that likes Trump? Have you read the polls?
It's 1/3.
So Rick Green is going to win based on 1/3 of the vote, right?
No. See, that's the funny thing. There's a funny thing about when you see Ed
12 points.
And,
Mark my word, 12 points.
Okay, we'll bet on
will
that.
Get creamed.
We'll bet on that. 12 points. That's the marker.
There probably more, but I'm just saying 12 to be safe.
No, that's the marker. It won't be 12. Ed's rarely right about these things. So it's the thing. It has to be virulently anti-Trump, where 1/3 of the state who's not in, and most of the 2/3 that hates Trump or disapproves of Trump is in Boston.
And Lawrence, Jeff. Lawrence is in that district, and they will guarantee that Rick loses.
Not necessarily. Like I said, he keep interrupting me. You keep interrupting me.
All right.
And then we're getting into territory that I want to get away from. Rick has as good a shot as any federal candidate will have. But the odds are still stacked against him, and nobody doubts that. But because they're not sufficiently anti-Trump enough for you, you have maybe a bit of a chip on your shoulder against them that they're not coming out as forcefully.
I also read the polls.
Yeah, I know you do. It's very good.
My guess, Lawrence is against Trump 90-10. Because
Okay.
in Boston, it's 87-13.
That's
Lawrence
right.
will guarantee that Rick's pro-Trump views will fail.
This is absurd. Pro-Trump views. Oh, boy. You know, it's tough to have a conversation if you want to do this.
Voted for Trump and told the Boston Herald, I voted for Trump.
Okay.
So I think if you vote for a candidate, you're pro-candidate, right, Jeff?
Well, not...
I voted for Baker. I'm pro-Baker. Right? He's pro-Trump.
If he didn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton. I mean...
He could have voted for Hillary Clinton. He voted for Trump. He could have voted for Evan McMullen.
Look,
he voted for Trump.
Put the microphone...
He picked Trump.
Okay.
McMullen was a reasonable conservative man. He could have voted for him.
Sure. He could have blanked the ballot. The point being is that the dynamics of this race, and I can guarantee you, we can place bets, and I'll prove you wrong in a year, and it'll be fine. That the factors that impact this race are not the Ed Lyons spectrum of anti-Trump hatred. It's going.
I agree.
It's not me. It's going to come down to how well he runs a campaign and how well
there
or
are
bad.
Issues, Jeff.
Stop interrupting me. Stop interrupting me. It's going to come down to how well he runs his campaign versus how well or bad the Democrat runs his campaign. It will be it will be the petri dish that I think we've wanted to see for quite some time as to how federal candidates to do. Now, the federal race that will probably be impacted more by Trump and the opinions about the president is the Senate race.
It's considered the national race more than the House.
Yes, because Elizabeth Warren is running for president in 2020.
She's also our U.S. Senator right now.
Yeah. She's got a lot of money in the bank.
50% approval rating.
How much? You keep doing this and interjecting when I can't hear you.
Elizabeth Warren has everything you'd want. She has a greater than 50% approval rating. She has national recognition, national fundraising, $9 million in the bank. She has tens of thousands of volunteers.
More than that.
I don't know. She has tens of thousands of volunteers all across. She went to Martha's Vineyard and drew a crowd of like 3,000 people in Martha's Vineyard, for crying out loud, for a campaign rally. Right? She has every advantage in the world that you'd want on paper. Yes, she should be more popular than she is. Yes, her running for president is a major flaw. Actually,
why should she be more popular than she is?
Well, this is where the opening is, which is that
it is.
Elizabeth Warren is supposed to be the epitome of our state's values. John Kingston had a good line about her, and I would have used this line too, which is that Elizabeth Warren, when she was a successful, highly paid Harvard professor, I have a lot of connections to Harvard. She was a very popular Harvard professor across any spectrum you would create. Very well liked. Kingston even said this in his announcement speech. He said she was very well liked. He's like, but then she took a darker path. And it's true that Warren went from being she was so liked, she was on the Massachusetts short list for the Supreme Court. Sort of like the Washington, D.C. long list, but the Massachusetts short list. I read many articles about previous Supreme Court appointments, even for when Kagan was selected, where she was in the top 10, especially here. Warren should be a much more popular senator than she is if she does represent our values in the way she claims she does.
Why is
But
she not?
but she doesn't. And I think that's funny. That why isn't she more popular? Why are her negatives as high as they are? Why is Troy Baker vastly more, as a Republican, more popular than she is? So that is the one flaw Elizabeth Warren, well, actually, that and running for president. She has two flaws. Running for president and vacating her next term is one of them.
There's a third, but go ahead.
Well, there's at least two.
I'll get into the third.
No, I agree with you. But I mean that her approval rating is like 55%. It should be 65. Why not? Flaw number one. Flaw number two. She's spoken about as a national presidential contender. She acts like one. But if she wants to run for president, it means the day she starts her next term, she abandons us. It's not like a senator who at the end of his term says, okay, I'm running for president, and you're not going to get the last 2 years out of me. In Warren's case, it would be the day I take office, I'm gone.
Yeah.
I think that her running for president is a major flaw for her. And the fact that she won't say she's not going to do it is a huge opening for our side. So I do think she has at least two fundamental flaws, even though she has so many advantages in terms of media, money, volunteers, that she does have these weaknesses.
The volunteer aspect is huge, but it's amazing how short people's memories are. Elizabeth Warren is a good candidate with a parentheses around her. She is never challenged. Never. She avoids media like the plague. And
yeah,
when
she does.
And when
That's
she
a very
gives,
fair charge.
And when she gives them a crumb. All right, just bring the bill. We'll take care of it. You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right. She has been terrible on the media. Terrible.
So what fascinates me is she is god-awful with the media, and when she hands out a morsel, a horrible crumb of media attention,
it's a one-way street for her.
It's like it's second page news in the Globe that it's just so, oh, she's finally opening up to the media. But there's a reason why. Brown never got to challenge her that much on it. He ran on the wrong issues that he shouldn't have run on. She's never been hit to her core in the way that, well, quite frankly, the way that I could hit her, about what she believes, why it's wrong, and what are better ideas to do that. It's just never happened. It's been a bubble. She
avoids those forums.
She's been protected the whole time. So if you're protected the whole time, you get weak. You get weak. She gets lots of adulation from her fans, but not a lot of competitive strengthening in those terms. The thousands of volunteers that flock to her like lemmings are impressive. Her millions of dollars are impressive. But that doesn't mean she doesn't have any weaknesses, because all of her strengths are in a vacuum. And that in and of itself is a huge weakness. We all right on the bill?
I'm struggling with the bill right now. No, I do think she has these weaknesses. I do think that she has been protected, but I also think she's just sort of just fled from certain kinds of scrutiny, and everybody has played along with it. And I think that has weakened her slightly.
Yeah.
That I think that if she had a credible candidate running against her, she might have to confront this. But I'm concerned that she won't have to. So I do think...
And that bothers me, and I'm going to do my best to, inside our active people here, I'm going to do my best to make sure she confronts that.
So, for instance, I thought that Ed Markey was vulnerable on a variety of issues as senator. But he decided that he would ignore Brian Hare, who had reasonable arguments against him, who had moderate ideology, who had government experience, made no mistakes, didn't have much money, and yet the media decided the fact that Ed Markey was not threatened by Brian Hare and didn't cover it.
But Ed Markey wasn't threatened by Brian. I know Brian; he's a good guy.
He's a good guy.
But
he didn't bring it. Whatever it was, he
needed to raise $1 million to make them scared. And
but even his message didn't threaten him.
Yeah, he couldn't figure out a way to get people interested to raise $1 million to get
But even when he was in those two tiny debates, he didn't say anything that meant that registered.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, money is
this
the big
is the thing. If you want to beat Elizabeth Warren, you have to go to Elizabeth. You have to attack Elizabeth Warren's strengths, which is her arguments on income inequality. You got to move it a little bit. There you go. Her arguments on income inequality, her arguments on healthcare,
capitalism,
her arguments on capitalism, her arguments on regulation. You go after those aspects, her strengths, not her weaknesses, not the stupid Indian references and all those ridiculous stuff. You go after her strengths and attack them for what they are, which are socialism light, progressivism. You can start to do real damage. And there are ways to do it. People can contact me if they want to know those ways. All right. Have we?
Yes, you do have to go after Warren for her strengths. You also have to go after Warren saying that despite that she is claiming to represent Massachusetts values, that there are huge portions of the state who feel like that she does not represent them. And I think that's not easy, but it's possible.
By gigantic, I think there's huge openings in the urban community. Honestly. I mean that. Because she is the quintessential white wine sipping, was it Cantabrian? How do you say somebody from Cambridge?
What?
The white wine sipper from Cambridge. How do you say that?
Oh, the
Cantabrian? No, something like that.
The Pinot Grigio.
no. Well, but regardless, that's her set. That's her set. The nose in the air, liberal, elitist, intellectual. There's a lot of those in Massachusetts, but there's plenty more voters who you get down to the brass tacks, aren't necessarily receptive to that kind of message. Look, I'm going to wrap up with this. Every Republican, including our wonderful governor, knows how hard a road it's going to be to get elected in this state. There are no illusions about this. There are no expectations of victory. None of that is the case. But it doesn't mean you just roll over and die. You do have to fight the fight, because if you truly believe in the principles you believe in, you're going to run on them. And nobody should shy away from them because of millions of dollars in the bank or tens of thousands of volunteers. You should still take it on, because I think whoever comes out of this race, and why don't we handicap it a little bit? I see, Jeff Deal. He's a popular guy. He's running a terrible campaign with a bad consultant who even Jeff's supporters want to fire Holly, which is fascinating to me, why he won't fire her, especially after that came out that she was lobbying for the Saudis. I mean, good God. If the guy wants a shot, he's got to can her. She stinks. She stinks. Fire her, Jeff. You're a nice guy. You could run a better campaign. You could definitely run a better campaign without Holly. Why you don't do it is beyond me.
I think you misunderstand who's in charge of the relationship.
Yeah, right. Maybe I do. Maybe I do. But I see Beth and John both getting 15%. Jeff will get 15%. That'll probably be it. If Gabe Gomez jumps in, I like Gabe. Good guy. Actually, I don't think he'll make 15%. I think if he does, he'll come in too late.
I don't see Gabe getting in.
Well, he probably won't, but I'm just saying, if he's thinking about it, it's probably too late, and I don't think he'd hit 15% on the thing. So they're going to fight it out until September, and you got to do something different. You got to take some risks. You gotta go after Warren. There's this old school mentality. Well, you got to let the voters get to know you and run your positive campaign. Sure, you can do that in tandem with the idea that you're going to go after Warren's strengths, attack her strengths, income inequality, healthcare, capitalism. Go after that, because, quite frankly, it's going to come down to that. Nobody's in some vacuum where we don't know that Elizabeth Warren's going to be the candidate and the nominee for the Senate race. So to pretend like, oh, you're just going to run your own race and not worry about who you're running against is absurd. And you have to You have to get creative. You got to get creative. You got to take some risks.
I do think there's some risks.
Calculated risks.
So my opinion is that I ask all candidates, like, what is your theory of the race? And, I asked this of Sean Milot in 2010 and in 2012. Like, what is your theory of the race? I think that it has to be of the places in your district or the state. Well, who votes you and why? In the cities, the suburbs, the exurbs, young people, old people, different ethnicities. Who votes for you and why? And if you had to, I once told the candidate, like, okay, if you win, and the Boston Globe writes about why you won, and they say, this is why he won, what do you say? I'm not saying you have to predict it perfectly, but you should have a theory of why you're going to win. And I've never supported Republican primaries for big races. I've always felt like we're too weak a party, and it's always like someone who can't possibly win versus somebody who could win, and why bother? Like Mark Fisher versus Shai Baker, there's so many examples we've seen.
Yeah.
But I do think for the first time with John Kingston and with Beth Lindstrom that this primary may actually have a point, which is that
was going to be good.
Which is that they're going to have different approaches to how they're running, and there's enough money behind both of them that I feel like we won't sort of blow the whole budget for the whole year in the primary.
No.
I feel like that this primary won't be a waste of time. So I think that's a good thing. And I actually don't know who will win. I think Beth Lindstrom is a more credible party person.
No,
I like Beth Lindstrom posting photos of her previous involvement with the party. I think that matters a lot for getting 15%. I think that Beth Lindstrom seems like a more genuine, down-to-earth person. I think that she's trying to have a middle ground in terms of the primary versus the general. Trying to hit themes in the primary more than the general. I think Kingston is an enigma. I think he's a great man with a great life story. He's running on a almost like a nonpartisan basis, even though he has some principles around taxes and religious liberty. That's all wonderful. I have no idea who the man is.
Yeah, that's a problem, man.
I think it's a huge problem.
Because look, you're if you're listening to this podcast, you're way deep inside the bubble, and you love the bubble, and you want the bubble to be filled with more air and more noxious fumes, and we're happy to oblige. But I couldn't believe that he came out with a 6-minute introduction video, and I didn't hear him say one word. Now, maybe that's strategy. I don't know what strategy that is.
It's early.
But it's early. Will anybody pay attention? Maybe. I mean, it got 20,000, 30,000 views online on Facebook alone. I don't know what the YouTube counts were. So people are watching it. They're checking it out. Are they getting to know you? Are you making a good impression? Maybe. But
I don't know.
But I thought it was well produced. I think nobody doubts the production value, but you have to you still, at the end of the day, you could be the most swell guy in the world. But if you don't give a reason why people should vote for you over the other person, it doesn't mean squat. And that's what people got to get into. I mean,
I'm glad
we're 3 months away from convention. That is an astoundingly short amount of time. And what each person should be doing is try to block one of the candidates from trying to get 50% plus one, because that means you get the endorsement of the party, and there's plenty of rules and benefits that you get in advantage of that. And they have to plan around that. So anyway,
I just mean that him and Beth seem like they're going to run different campaigns and not the same campaign. I think that's great, because I don't
think they will, and that's good.
I don't know what worked against Warren. And I hope they find out, because I'll support. I won't vote for Jeff Deal if he wins, no matter what happens.
I will.
I won't. He's a clown. I won't vote for him.
No, I will, because regardless of who he's employed and how he's run his campaign, Jeff going to Washington and doing nothing is way better than Warren going to Washington and doing her something. So
he'll lose by 30 against her. I'm not worried.
Of course he will. But
I would vote for Beth or John. And honestly, I have no idea who has the right approach. For the first time, let's let the primary, as you were exactly right, Jeff. You have to experiment, take chances, won't be beat by a typical campaign at all.
This is one thing, and let me tell both campaigns this. If you're listening to this, she will not be beat by running a generic campaign and going by the book. You gotta
break out.
You gotta do something different. You gotta break out and experiment and do some fun things, some exciting things, some interesting
Find
things.
New weaknesses.
Yeah. If you don't do that, you're dead in the water. If you do that, you're probably going to become the front runner, and you're going to start beating both. If it's, you're going to beat the other two primary opponents if you do that. But we'll see. We'll see if that happens. Anyway,
this is the first big primary I've seen on our side where I don't know who's going to win, and I almost don't care. I think that there's money and ingenuity going into this. I'm looking forward to it.
They'll both represent the party well, and I can say this, and we'll end with this. I'm going to end with this. I can say with confidence that regardless of who the nominee is, I think Governor Baker is in very good shape. I don't think there's going to be some turnout model that a lot of the folks we know on the inside were worried about. He'll be fine.
Last week, 69%.
He's going to get elected. The closest primary or the closest challenger on the Dem side has $50K in the bank. Gov, you're fine. All right. That is it for this episode of the Lincoln Review. Ed, did you know this is the 51st episode? I didn't mention it on the last episode. Was our 50th episode. 50. Well, here, clink.
Wow. Well, cheers.
It's to 51. Listen to us and subscribe to us on iTunes. Share this on Twitter. Share this on Facebook. Share this on. Well, we're not on Instagram. I don't know how you do that, but we're on iTunes. We're on SoundCloud. We're on Stitcher. We're on all the podcatchers. We're on Google Play. I figured out how to get us on Google Play. We're also on YouTube if you want to see our smiling faces on YouTube. Stay tuned for very exciting things we've got coming on. I do want to get all of the Democratic CD3 candidates on this episode. I will make it my mission before their primary to do so, and maybe even invite some of them back on after the convention. We have many exciting guests planned. Oh boy, do we have some good guests, some very intelligent and forceful people in the political universe. So, this is the Lincoln Review podcast where we try to bring intelligence back to our political discourse. Hopefully we succeeded in this episode. Ed Lyons, as always, it was a good conversation.
You too, Jeff.
Bye-bye.